Hi everyone, Gina McDowell here today, and I am joined by Dr. Jacqueline Doxey King, who is a neuropsychologist here at our hospital. Jacqueline will be covering an extremely important topic that is of interest to many of our parents: caring for children after exposure to race-related violence in the media. Caregivers often do whatever they can to protect their children from experiencing traumatic events in their own lives, but our children are very much exposed to violence that is reported in the media. And recently, we've seen a significant amount of race-related violence in the media, and it's helpful for our caregivers to know how their children might respond to these events and what are the best ways and some things that they can do to support. So, Jacqueline, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me, Gina.
Let's start with the media in general. How can media coverage of violent events affect our children?
Well, we want to keep in mind that children are impacted differently depending on their age. So if you have young children, they're more concrete and more literal. They may think that things are happening in their immediate environment or things are happening repeatedly. So that's more for those kids that are ages 3 to 5. School-age children may worry that similar events can happen to them or to their family. And then when we look at teens, they may become more anxious or more fixated, and then they may fixate on the events in order to cope. So then they're watching things maybe even more repeatedly than other kids their age.
Makes sense, and it depends on that age and developmental level and where they're at. So let's think about our families who are raising a child of color. What are some things that they should consider as well?
So for children of color, we want to keep in mind that they're witnessing these things happen in a lot of cases to people that look like them. So they may have increased anxiety and worry. They may have a lot of fears that their life will be shortened or that they may be victims of similar violence. And they may start to feel more threatened and more suspicious in their everyday life. We also want to keep in mind that things like aggression and sadness, difficulties with attention, or even sleep problems can be a sign that they're being impacted by their trauma and witnessing racial violence.
So extremely important things to keep an eye out for and to just kind of be aware of that these can pop up. So what should a caregiver do if their child has been exposed to race-related violent events in the media? Like, this is something that they know that has happened. What are some steps they can take?
So I would, for the younger children particularly, try to limit their exposure to further media or racial violence as much as you can, just because we know that anxiety can increase with repeated viewing. Also, it's really important to monitor their feelings and encourage them to express their feelings and thoughts with you. That can help them to get anything off of their mind that might be disturbing them from the videos. Books are a great way to introduce conversations, but also help the child to relate. There's a book called Something Happened in Our Town, which is about racial injustice, and so that's a good one for parents, especially in this situation, to share with their child.
Great resources for our little kids. And you mentioned earlier, teens tend to respond differently, just given their developmental level. So what are some things that caregivers can do to support or respond to their teens who might have been exposed to race-related violence in the media?
Yeah, so it's important to talk to them about what they've seen, spend time maybe watching things with them so that you guys can have discussions and clear up any misunderstandings or confusion that they might have about what's going on, because you can probably provide more historical context to what they're saying. Especially for children of color, we want to make sure that we're checking in over time and throughout. So if they feel okay one week, the next week it might have been it might be too much for them. And so we want to make sure that we're continually checking in about what they've seen, what their peers are talking about online, just to make sure they're able to express what they're feeling if they need to.
It's a great point about checking into about clearing up miscommunications or misunderstandings and confusion, because our teens do really rely on social media to get a lot of their news, whether it's they're reading it from reputable sources or they're seeing that things that people are posting. And there can be a lot of confusion and maybe some just like even mixed messages too, and all of that. Depending on if it's a reputable source or not. So I think that's a really good opportunity for caregivers to kind of step in and say, like you said, provide some more historical content and some more data behind it, and just more other trusted resources that they might be able to look to as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if a caregiver starts to notice that their child or teen is, maybe becoming more anxious or worrying more, or might even seem more depressed after witnessing these events in the media, what should they do? What are some things that they can do to support their child?
Yeah. Especially for younger kids, remind them that they're in a physically safe space. Try to the extent possible, maintain predictability and routines. We realize that that's hard for some families, but just keeping things on routines is always something that helps to comfort kids. Showing them examples of helpers in their community, people that are helping clean up or helping to give back, is something that shows that there's not just the violence, but there's also people to help you in community support. If you notice that they're particularly stressed or anxious, teaching and practicing relaxation techniques is helpful for kids. So things like deep breathing would be nice. On Our Sleeves has some videos that have that talk a little bit more about this that parents can access. And we also want to encourage, families, if they feel like their child is not coping day to day with these difficulties, to reach out to a professional, like a counselor or a therapist, that can help you work out and give the child more coping skills for what they've witnessed. And I also think it's important that we as parents take care of ourselves and make sure that we take care of our own feelings and stress surrounding these events, because that will equip us better to be able to manage the emotions of our kids.
Definitely. Caregivers are going through this themselves as well. And I think it's really important to point that out. I love that, of just, your own self-care is also as much of a priority as your child's. So great point to make, to continue to kind of, take that time for yourself as well. So this is all such valuable information for our families. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really, truly appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
So for you guys at home, for more information on this topic, check out the blog post below, some additional just tips and resources for you. That is all we have for you today. As always, don't forget to like us and subscribe, and we will see you next time.